Hello and welcome to Brookdale's Visiting Writers series. My name is Michal Broek. I'm a professor here in the English department at Brookdale, and I'm very excited today to be speaking with Sholeh Wolpé. Thank you for joining me.
Happy to be here.
You are a poet, a translator, an editor, a playwright. I'm probably missing something.
And a woman.
And a woman, of course. And I want to touch on many of those things, but most recently you have a book of translations that's been published, The Conference of the Birds, translations of Sufi mystic poet Attar, right? Which most Americans probably are not familiar with at all. They're more familiar with Rumi. Right?
Exactly.
So who is Attar and how did you become involved with this project?
Attar is, Rumi wrote about Attar. Attar traveled the 7 valleys of love while I am at the bend of the first alley. That's what Rumi thought about Attar. Attar was 1 generation earlier, met Rumi when Rumi was a child, foretold his greatness.
Really?
But Rumi learned from Attar. Attar's masterpiece, he was a 12th century Sufi mystic poet. His masterpiece is The Conference of the Birds. And it's the story of the birds of the world gathering to seek their sovereign. And the hoopoe, which is this gorgeous bird. In reality, I mean, if you go and look it up on the internet, you see this gorgeous bird with a beautiful crown, steps forward and says, I know where our beloved lives. It's in Mount Qaf, and I'm going to lead you there. And then, of course, every bird comes up then with an excuse not to go. Sounds familiar, right? We do that when we want to take a difficult journey. And the hoopoe answers them one by one. And they eventually take this journey, and they arrive there, and they find their beloved, who's by the name of Simorg. But in Persian, if you break down the word Simorg, it becomes 30 birds, and only 30 birds make it to the abode of the beloved. It's a beautiful journey of the soul. It's a story, an allegory. In fact, Attar invented this form of storytelling. It's very entertaining. It's instructive, and yet through parables, very entertaining parables, he allows you to enter these instructions that he's giving you, the spiritual instructions. So it's I just loved translating it. But can I say one more thing about it?
Of course, no, please.
The beautiful allegory of the book is that we all have to take our own journey. We each have our own journey, and all of us are heading towards what he called the great ocean, metaphorically. And he says, pay attention to your own journey. Don't turn around and try to judge other people. Pay attention to your own, give up your ego, because ego is the most dangerous thing that you can possibly possess. And strive to arrive at the great ocean as a pure drop of water. That's when you can join the ocean, become the ocean, know the ocean. And yet, if you arrive at it wrapped in your ego as a pebble, the ocean never says, don't come in. It says, welcome. You enter, you sink to the bottom, and will always know yourself. And that's hell.
That sounds very powerful. How did you come to know this story? Did you know it as a child? You were born in Iran, correct?
I was born in Iran.
Okay.
I left when I was 13. I went to the Caribbean, to Trinidad, and then to the UK, and then I came here. But you know, for Iranians, poetry is part of our lives.
Okay, much more so than
Oh my
in
God,
America.
much more so than here. On Friday afternoons, Fridays in Iran are equivalent to your Sundays.
Right.
You know, it's our day off. I remember after a big meal with a family, we would all gather and we would take a stack of cards with poetry of Hafez on each card, and we would pass it around, and then that would be like our fortune. Hafez would tell our fortune. That was wonderful. I mean, I grew up with that. We memorized poetry.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so
It's very different. So I knew Attar, of course. I mean, as a child.
Right.
It's a lovely story. Knew some of it by heart, actually, but
Really?
no longer.
What was the process like of moving from 12th century Persian, which I assume is also different from contemporary language, to English? How do you do that? What do you lose in that process, or what do you gain in that process? What is that like?
Well, at the age of 13, I didn't speak a lick of English. So that was very difficult to make that transition from one language to another. And so, but it gives me also an ear for the music of language. Because I remember in Iran, I was fascinated by English language, but I could only hear its music. I would turn on, the radio, pretend I understood, but it was. So I think later when I moved into translation, thanks to poet Galway Canal, who really encouraged me, because he knew Farrukh Farrokhzad, iconic 20th century Iranian poet, the most important female poet of the 20th century. And he knew her, and he encouraged me to translate her, which I did. That's her, actually.
Oh, okay.
Beautiful woman. So I translated her first. And for me, as I've written in the Conference of the Birds in the introduction, translation is recreation. I'm not a scholar. I've never claimed to be a scholar. So I approach language and poetry as a poet myself.
Right.
So one of the things that I've written about is that I believe that languages, two poems in two different languages are like the sky and the ocean, like the sea. And you can only reflect the sky into the sea. The sea will never be the sky.
Right.
But in your reflection, you will see the gestation of the moon, the movement of the clouds, the birds. And for me, that is the process of translation.
Okay.
That movement from one to another.
Right. So in no way is a literal word for word, obviously.
Oh God,
no, you can't do that, right?
No,
Because you
as
lose.
Persians say, God forbid. No, that's a scholarly way of doing it.
Right.
What I believe needs to happen in translation recreation is recreating the experience of poetry without sacrificing the meaning.
Okay.
So it's difficult.
So you've also translated English. You translated Whitman's Song of Myself into Persian. What was that like then?
Yes, I did that. I co-translated it with an Iranian poet, Mohsen Ahmadi. We spent a year, one section a week for the University of Iowa's international program. We were commissioned to do that. It was a beautiful experience, In Persian, Walt Whitman is gorgeous.
Really?
جشن میگیرم خود را میسرایم خود را و هرچه از آن من از آن تو خواهد بود چرا که هر ذره من به همان مایه جوهر فرد توست. Gorgeous, right? Now,
I have to ask you, what section
beginning.
Is that? That's from the beginning?
Yeah,
okay.
I sing myself.
Okay.
And what is beautiful about what's happening is that we sent that to Iran. Of course, it was published in the United States. We sent that to Iran for publication. It's been sitting in the censor's office all these years. Now it's been released. So at the same time, Walt Whitman is coming out in Iran, Attar is coming out in United States.
Wow.
The universe is speaking to us, right?
And fascinating too that Whitman is censored, because in the original, I mean, it's sexy, it's disturbing, it's rebellious, the language is, and so that in some sense that's still very true.
Yeah,
is really fascinating.
I'm amazed. I heard the book has been released from the censor's office untouched.
Really? Crossing your fingers.
Yes.
And when you just spoke it, one of the first things I thought was, how do you capture the sound of Whitman, which to me is one of the most beautiful things about Song of Myself in particular. But to hear you speak it, it's so musical.
Yes.
It's lovely.
Because as poets, this is probably a controversial thing to say, and here I'm saying it on television. But I believe poets should translate poetry as much as possible. Scholarly translation is important, it's necessary, absolutely. But if you want to experience it as poetry, how can you translate something as poetry if you're not a poet yourself?
Right. No, I think that really makes sense.
Yeah.
And as a poet of your own work, have you found that the translation, that process, has changed your work or informed your own
Oh, absolutely.
work?
How can you not be touched by something that you're cutting into its bone and marrow? You know, how can you not be touched by that? So I think in a way it's a two-way process, because not only I am taking in the language of what I'm translating, but also the poet I'm translating is taking my poetic language as well, because after all, in English, whatever comes out is my poetic language, right? So it's a two-way process, and it's beautiful.
That's really fascinating.
Yeah.
We're just going to take a quick break. We're here today with poet, translator, playwright, Sholeh Wolpé, and we'll be right back.
The Brookdale faculty here, they really want you to succeed. They really want to see you reach for the stars and push you beyond your limits to make you into the person that they see in you and that you may not even see in yourself. Finding a friend or finding a mentor in somebody that you've once viewed as your teacher, and somebody that you can now go to, not only with school stuff, but with life stuff. I know that Brookdale has prepared me to transfer to wherever I want to go, and I can't thank them enough for that.
I graduated from Brookdale in 2014, and I just graduated from Rutgers Business School. I was working two part-time jobs, a little bit over 30 hours a week, while attending school at Lincroft and the Freehold campuses full-time. I was fortunate enough to get a good internship in the city, which helped me continue to finance my education in my second year. I faced so many challenges that had I given up, I wouldn't be where I am today.
I applied here to Brookdale as a civil engineering major. Brookdale is a great place to start, especially for someone that comes from a small high school. The class sizes are small. Teachers actually take the time to learn your name and engage with you. I interned at T&M Associates. They offered me the internship again this summer, and I have a job lined up upon receiving my bachelor's degree. My Brookdale experience has given me the courage to step out of my comfort zone and pursue dreams I never imagined.
Hi, I'm Laura McCullough, and I'm an Associate Professor of English in the Humanities Institute here at Brookdale Community College. I'm also a writer, I'm a poet, and an editor. I have a number of books out, and I work my butt off writing and teaching. Some of the things that we teach in the creative writing program here are a mixed genre creative writing class. It's an introductory class. We teach poetry, fiction, creative nonfiction, and screenwriting. There are two reasons to take classes in creative writing here at Brookdale, and the first is easy. If you want to be a writer, we can help you figure out an educational and career path to do what you love and what you're talented at. But the other reason is because creative writing is about tapping into your imagination. It's about finding the creative person inside of yourself, and you don't have to be a writer to take creative writing. The number one attribute that businesses and organizations need and want today is thinking creatively. Looking at a problem and not saying it's either this or that, but finding a third way. So creative writing classes will help you to think more creatively. It'll also help you to be more empathic, to understand yourself better, and to understand your place in a very changing, complex world. We love our creative writing students here. We work with them in class and out. And if you're at all interested in tapping into your creativity or finding out what kind of writer you are, come and take one of our classes or email one of us. The creative writing faculty here are all active writers, and we'd love to hear from you.
Hello and welcome back to Brookdale's Visiting Writer Series. Going to continue our conversation with Sholeh Wolpé. So we were talking about translation, but I want to also talk about your original poetry. Your most recent book is Keeping Time with Blue Hyacinths, right? I want to talk about the language, which is so sensual and so beautiful. But one of the themes that seems to run through that book, and I think your others, is the idea of the exile, or the person who has left. And I wondered if you could speak to that. Why is being in exile something that recurs?
Home is a missing tooth. The tongue reaches for hardness, but falls into absence. Because I left at age 13, and I moved from country to country. I was in the Caribbean, then I was in the UK, then I was in this country at in different states, going to different schools. The idea of home, I became obsessed with the idea of home, because at some point I realized I cannot go back to what I considered to be home. The 1979 revolution was hijacked by the Islamic regime, and a lot of people fled, including my parents, and I just couldn't go back at the time. So I became obsessed with it. And of course, as a writer, once you're obsessed with something, you keep writing it over and over until you realize where you are. And I think finally where I have arrived at is that, like Dorothy in Oz, I've always carried home inside of myself. No matter where I go, I am at home. And I realized that, my gosh, if the world truly understands that, we will have no more boundaries, because home is wherever you are. And whoever you're with, they are your people. So I think the process of writing helped me to arrive there. But in terms of exile, I still would love to go back to Iran.
Yes.
But I cannot. I'm not really able to with guaranteed safety as a writer, as a woman,
Right, and you've edited an anthology of poems by Iranian American poets, right?
Yes, for the forbidden poems from Iran and its exiles, yes.
Okay.
And because I wanted to showcase all the poets, old and young, well-published and not so well-published, showcase them in an anthology to just to connect their work with the American public. Because honestly, I believe literature is the best kind of bridge between cultures and people. And I really wanted the English-speaking world, in particular the Americans, to know the Iranians through their poetry, not through our politicians who come and go,
So in that sense, the language transcends those boundaries, transcends
Absolutely,
nationalism.
I mean, look, over the thousands of years, what remains to us today is whatever it's the arts and the literature. Where are the, chest-beating politicians of the time?
They're forgotten. But
absolutely, they did not mean anything.
Right. This power of language, is that what also drew you to another anthology, Breaking the Jaws of Silence? What is the silence there that you're talking about? What's the genesis of that?
Well, I used to get emails from some Iranian writers saying, we put our voices out there. We are writing, you're translating, but we don't hear from the American poets addressing us.
Okay.
And then I thought, interesting. And with Penn USA in Los Angeles, we started this project collecting poetry from American writers that address the world.
Okay.
And so we had a huge event at Arm & Hammer Museum in Los Angeles, and then we thought, well, this is an anthology. We really got to put it together. And the poets, the 60 poets in the anthology were very generous. They donated those poets to Penn, and we were able to publish
So the
it.
silence that they're breaking then is the silence of politics, or not writing about politics, or not writing about being engaged in the world, or what is the
At
silence?
many levels. I
Okay.
think at all of those things, yes. Yeah.
And were they writing, do you feel like, toward Iranian American poets?
Some did.
Some
Some directly, like there were a couple of poems directly addressing what happened with Neda, who was shot. It went viral, the video, the girl who was shot in the head.
Right, which you have a poem about as well.
Yes, which I also have a poem about it. But some were just addressing the world through personal meditation. You know, like meditating on, say, the American flag. What does it mean? You know, so some of them were quieter, some of them were louder.
Fascinating. And you have another book that you've edited as well, correct? You have
I have.
three
I
books.
really do.
Three
I have.
anthologies. What has drawn you to being an anthologist, to being an editor? Because you're a translator, poet, and editor. What's that process
know. It's
like?
other than sort of being a workaholic, other than that, is that, you know, as a poet, you meet a lot of poets.
Right.
And you sort of want to gather their voices. Maybe I'm a very social person, and so maybe in my writing also I want to have parties. And maybe it's a way of throwing a party. But I have, you know, I like, because I think being an editor of an anthology, you're also a creator, because you're creating something out of many, many different voices.
Right.
Like Breaking the Jaws of Silence, indeed, I urge the reader to read from the very beginning to the very end, because it is like a symphony. The way I've arranged it, it's a
Right.
journey.
You're not just throwing everything in
No,
there.
I'm not
Right.
throwing it together. I did another anthology, but I was a regional editor for Tablet and Pen, which Reza Aslan was the editor of that. So, and that was a beautiful experience, because I was able to pull together voices from Iran.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you're also a playwright. And you have a play now, Shame,
Yes.
correct? That is in staged readings
Yes.
Around the country.
Yes.
So the title itself is intriguing, Shame. What shame are we?
One of the
examining?
characters in my play says, "Don't you see, shame is our boogeyman." It's a play about the cost of happiness. Happiness at what cost? What are we willing to give up to claim personal freedom? Especially in Iranian culture, there is a word called abru. And that means the water over the face. And in a way, what that means is that the veneer you build here,
Right.
has to reflect things that are absolutely beautiful, no matter what's going on behind it.
So hiding.
And yes,
Right.
so we are taught to hide things that are shameful, even though they make us miserable, even though they take away our personal freedom. And this play tackles that.
Can you give a specific example of a character or situation that?
Well, one of the characters is a woman who's just found out she's gay. And the sister, they're together, and the sister is terrified. They're both terrified that if their parents find out, the mother character who's come to visit, she would just die of shame. And there is this struggle that's going on between them, because long ago there was a case of abuse. Family member abused the girls. I don't want to say too much because I want you to see the play.
I do too.
But they hid it because they thought it's a shameful thing. If the
Right.
parents, in their childhood's mind, and it's something that they kept up. And now, if she comes out with this shame again, that sacrifice they made long ago, not telling it, keeping it under, would go for nothing. So there is this struggle there. Then there is this Iranian man who's come there, and he's trying to protect himself and his family, because it's his sister who's having an affair with this character. So
Okay.
there are many. This is just one example.
Right, right.
Yeah.
You've been so successful as a poet. What moved you to start to write for the stage? Or why could Shame not be written as a book of poems?
Yeah. In Sufi mystic philosophy, what I love about it is that dualism does not exist. Things are not black and white. It's a pantheistic way of thinking, and what it is that everything is at very, very different levels at the same time. So I think of my own writing in the same way. I feel like, yeah, I am a poet because I've written poetry, but that should not stop me from expressing myself in other forms of art.
Right.
Because ultimately, who I am, my creative self, is not this thing that's one thing or another.
Right.
I exist as a creator.
Multidimensional,
so
right?
I don't really think of myself as a poet or a translator or a playwright. I'm just someone who's very fond of expressing herself in whatever form I can.
Do you see yourself writing more plays then?
Absolutely. In
Yes.
fact, I'm working on a couple of other plays, but I would love, I know that a play has been, long time ago, was written based on the Conference of the Birds, but I would like to write a play based on this book as well.
I would love to see that.
Yeah,
It'd be wonderful.
It'd be awesome.
It would. Thank you very much, Sholeh,
Thank
for
you.
talking
Thank
with
you for
me
having
tonight.
me.
Of course, I'm really looking forward to your reading this evening on campus.
Me too.
And for Brookdale's Visiting Writers series, I'm Michael Broek. Thank you for watching.